Of our program. Yep. Hey, everybody. I'm an alcoholic named Carol, and I was given the gift of sobriety in Fort Worth, Texas at the Glass House on May 1st, 1988, for which I'm really grateful, and it definitely is a gift. And I came into the Glass House in Fort Worth, kind of through the back door. I came into an Al-Anon meeting because of his drinking, but we drank the same. And I got to the group, and you know what? My first meetings were open AA meetings, and I sat in the back of that room and I listened to you tell your story, and I went, I did that, and yeah, that happened to be, and I identified. But when I came to you, I thought I had a hateful, punishing God, because I always made deals and promises. I dropped out of religion when I was about 11 or 12 years old. I was brought up telling my parents telling me if I didn't do what they said or I didn't behave a certain way, that God was going to punish me. That's what I grew up with. And then I went through life. And then I did things. And when I drank, I did things that went against morals, principles, values. And by the time I got to you, I wouldn't pick up a card if it said the word God on it. And the Glass House met at a church annex. So it took me a while to even want to go to that building. I'm Jewish. I didn't want to go to a church and have religion. But what the Glass House is, it was a spiritual. They called the Glass House the God Squad back then. Glass House was 5 years old when I got there, and it was the room where the AA meetings were. It was a long room and had a lot of windows. And they said we should live as if we live in a glass house, that my insides and my outsides should match. My words, my actions, and my deeds need to reflect that. That a loving God expresses itself through me, they told me. And my words, actions, and deeds need to reflect that. And I had to learn stuff that you told me. And it totally, if the person you see, this Carol, totally different than the one that came in here. I haven't had a drink in 12,462 days because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and a higher power. And there's a line in the 12 and 12. When Ali asked me to pick a line, it was really challenging for me because I love so much of our big book and our 12 and 12. But on page 97 in the 12 and 12, it says, and I like to read things out loud in the singular. It says, I recoiled from meditation and prayer obstinately. I want to tell you a little about my first sponsor, because everything that I know now, it's come from a lot of people over the years, but primarily it came from this wonderful woman that God gave me as a gift, and her name was Lois. She got sober in June 1966. She had a third of a lung, was on oxygen, confined to bed the last 7 years of her life. And she taught me the program of Alcoholics Anonymous as outlined in our big book. And she kept it very simple. And she taught me so much. And most of what she taught me, I still remember. I've heard other things at meetings. And I want to share some things with you and some of the prayers that I was given. Now, if you want, you are welcome to borrow them, modify them, change them, share them, whatever you would like that fits you and your conception of whatever higher power you want to use. My higher power, I call God. And I came to find this God through Alcoholics Anonymous. The big book says, God is everything or nothing. What do I want God to be? And I listened to you over the years, and I want to tell you a little about my God. So when you hear some of the prayers that I was given and that I've heard, you might understand them a little where I'm coming from. Told you what I thought of this higher power. But Lois let me borrow her higher power for a while. So I would listen to you. The big book says God's everything or nothing. So what do I want God to be? Now, my God has not changed since I've come in here, but my awareness of God has changed. I put a picture behind me that I took being up in a hot air balloon in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we had a meeting in the sky with 3 of us. Several times I did that over the years. And God sees from a different perspective than I do. So what happened is, I don't have that hateful, punishing God. You said I would listen to you. Some of you, I liked what you said about your higher power, and some of you, I said that doesn't work for me. God is not my best friend, and God is not my parent. The reason for that is I couldn't trust my parents. They lied to me. They didn't always show up and do what they said, and I couldn't rely on them. And I had to be responsible from the time I was 10, take care of a brother, sister, house. It didn't make me an alcoholic, but I learned I couldn't rely on anybody. I had to think I had to do everything and be in charge. Some people said God's their best friend. Well, that doesn't work either, because Lois taught me she's human, not to put her on a pedestal. She won't always be there for me. And she died when I had a year sober. She was almost 23 years sober. And right now, if somebody were to call me, I am not available. So I don't want a God like that. My God's available all the time. And God, sometimes when I was new, I'd say, God, I don't know what I'm feeling or thinking. Please just read my heart. Not my brain, because my thoughts got me to you the way I did. So what I also found out is I used to hear you say, I invite God into my day. Well, I did that for a while, and I thought, why do I want to invite God into my day? It's small, it's limited. I can't see outside the room I'm in. But God sees farther and wider and knows the future, and my God has a big eraser. And I read my big book out loud in the singular, because it makes more sense. It says, I am like the actor. I want to set the stage in the play. But when I came to you, you told me I had to give that up. You used to say, let God or be God. You also said, no peace, N-O, peace, N-O, God. No God, K-N-O-W, God, K-N-O-W, peace. That's been my experience too. If I rely on God and not on me, my best thinking got me to you the way it did. Not a good place. The contempt prior to investigation, I think it was Pat that read it. That was me. Lois used to call me intractable. Not only would she call me intractable, but she wouldn't tell me how to spell it. And she wouldn't tell me what it meant. We used dictionaries. We didn't have Google back then. The era I got sober in, just so you know, we had phones that were attached to walls, and we had cords on them that would tangle. We had cassette tapes. We used dictionaries. Meetings were in person. Our group had one meeting a week, except for a women's meeting on Tuesday and a men's meeting on Tuesday and another on Saturday. So I went to different groups. And we listened to cassette tapes, and we wrote letters to each other. I did all the things that you told me. And so that what happened is Lois wouldn't tell me what it meant. She made me look it up in the dictionary, right? The contempt prior to investigation. I was one of those really strong. But what I learned is my way is not so good. And just so you know, intractable means stubborn, obstinate, and difficult to treat or cure. And I am not as intractable now as I used to be. When I was new, you all told me, ask God to keep you in this sober in the morning and say thank you at night. I thought that's too hokey. It's not going to work. You said you didn't care if it worked or not, just take the action. You told me I don't think my way into right action. My actions and my thinking will change. So I started using that prayer, even though I didn't believe it. And days started adding up and weeks started happening. I said, I can go 2 weeks without a drink. It was a hard 2 weeks, but I did it. White knuckle, not drinking, emotional pain hitting. What do I do? And I have 1,780 weeks. But what I had to do when that pain hit, you told me to work the steps, and you told me I can not go back out no matter what. I was at a meeting when that 2 weeks hit, and I wanted a drink. And this is the first time that sober, without a drink, I saw a higher power working. Because there was a man in the kitchen, and he told me not to go back out because it's not better out there, that a lot of yets could happen, that I might not make it back. And he told me to go back in the room and sit with those women and tell them what's going on, and they'll share with me and I'll share with them. And they told me I don't have to feel that way or drink ever again. For me, all the steps have promises if I take the action. Everything in the big book has been true for me as far as what I need to do for action to keep me sober. I sat with those ladies and we talked and we cried, and I didn't drink ever again because that I am one of the lucky ones that I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, didn't go to treatment, got one desire chip, never drank again, because I was asked if I'm willing to go to any length to be sober. One of my friends not in the program said AA's brainwashing me, and I told Lois, and she told me that's okay, my brain needs washing. So she would give me direction to do. And I would pray, I'm willing to be 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 willing to try your way. Sometimes I would get mad and not talk to her for a couple of days. And then I saw the story in the back. It said, I'll show her. And who did I show? That person got drunk. Thankfully, I didn't. I realized her way was better than my way. But I don't know if you all know, there's a little kids game. It's got circles and triangles and rectangles and stars. Well, what I was trying to do is I was trying to put a triangle in a triangle sometimes, but I had it turned wrong and it wouldn't fit. And you said, Carol, don't force it. You don't have to do it your way anymore. We'll show you a new way to do it. And it didn't feel comfortable at first. And I'm going to share something. I would like you to all do this. They told me to clasp my hands. So I want everybody to clasp your hands. Okay. They said, Carol, what thumb is in the front? I said, my right one. They said, switch it. So my left thumb's in the front. They said, how does that feel? I said, it doesn't feel right. It feels uncomfortable. They said, Carol, that's what new behavior in Alcoholics Anonymous is going to be at first. It's going to feel strange and uncomfortable, and you're not going to like it. But the more you do it, the more comfortable it's going to get, and it's going to be automatic. If you keep doing the new actions and the new behaviors and take the suggestions, they're going to be automatic. And every day they told me, clasp my hands many times a day. And every time my right thumb's in the front, to switch it to so my left one is, until it becomes comfortable and automatic. And that's what had happened. And now when I do the old behavior, maybe those little lies, maybe not wanting to take an action of something, it feels uncomfortable. And I don't like it anymore. I like contented sobriety. They used to say, wear the world as a loose garment, and I didn't understand what it meant. It means no matter what's happening outside of me, that my center is peaceful. Lois was always one of those people that said, Carol, first, if I had something happening, I'd tell her, and she would actually laugh. And then she would ask me what I'm grateful for. Sometimes she would say, Carol, stand up and take 2 steps and say, thank you, God, you can walk, talk, and breathe at the same time. She could not do that. She was confined to bed with 1/3 of a lung on oxygen for 7 years. I have had a lot of surgery sober, and I can't even stay home 2.5 weeks when I can get out of bed. It's hard. But she gave me a lot of prayers to use. I was still using that, God, please keep me sober, and say thank you at night. I put a note on my mirror as directed, and it said, Dear Carol, I know what I'm doing. Love God. That's all I needed to know. I'm not God. They said, let God or be God, or play God. I don't want to play God. My big book says there's 2 sins. One's to interfere with my own growth. One's to interfere with the growth of another. Lois gave me some prayers that I will share with you. One of them was, Carol, please ask God to not let you do things to hurt yourself anymore. Another one was, God, if it be your will, can I see people and situations as you do? I work through the steps for a lot of things. Anything happening in my life, God can take care of my drinking, but God can also take care of every other aspect of my life. So I just say, okay, God. Now I don't pray I'm willing to be willing to be willing to be willing anymore. I just say, okay, God, let's see how this goes. And I'm going to have a lesson and an experience that you're going to have me share through with somebody else, and I'm going to grow through it. And I told you I read my big book out loud in the singular. I still do that. Any of my literature, if I want to remember what I read, because when you read how it works out loud, some of the things that have been read stick in my mind. And when something happens, especially when I was new and something would happen, the things I read and the things you said and how it works, I stood at a turning point. Here I asked God for intuitive thought or decision. I drank at home my last years of drinking. So Lois didn't want me home drinking. She got me very involved in service work. I got women's numbers and I called them, and I had to go to women's meetings even though I didn't like women, and they told me they're going to save my life. And learning to make phone calls is going to save my life. Lois asked me if I would let somebody dump a bucket of garbage in the middle of my living room. And I said, well, no. And she said, why would you let somebody dump it in your mind? And don't dump it in meetings. What other prayers? I just had so many to do. And my whole big book, it's a prayer, all the steps, right? Ask God, know that my life is unmanageable. God, I'm powerless over whatever it is, people, places, things. I choose to not let it make my life unmanageable. Please let me see this as you do. Second step, God, please help me have sane thinking in this area of my life. Third step, I made a decision to turn my will and life over to God and to Alcoholics Anonymous to do the program the best I can. And I was doing my fourth step, but it was also a prayer. God, please let me see what you want me to see. And let me share what you want me to. And I asked God in all those steps, God, let me take all of me, and I don't use good and bad anymore. Things aren't good or bad for me. I've learned the things I thought were good aren't, and the things I thought were bad turn out to be good and blessings. Ask God for strength. God gives me difficulties to overcome to make me stronger. And there's so many prayers. So Lois had me read in the morning and at night, 3 times a day, once in the middle of the afternoon. And we didn't have cell phones. I had to Xerox pages out of my big book and carry them around with me. And I Xeroxed the 3rd and 7th step, and I Xeroxed page 68 to 71 because she said that has instructions. That I asked God to help me set my ideals in every area of my life, not just sex, but every area. It says the right answers will come if I want them in every area. And then I read 84 to 88 because she said that tells me what to do in the morning and at night and what to watch for all day. They're all prayers. And I get to do that. Now, I thought meditation was harder, right? Because I thought, oh, it's a pretty day. I got out of a meeting. I'll go sit in the botanical gardens in Fort Worth. It's October. It was, the roses were in bloom. Do you know I couldn't sit still for 5 minutes? Not 5 minutes. But what God did is he gave me this wonderful woman that was confined to bed. And I'd go to meetings, but I'd sit on her bed. And I learned how to sit still and listen by sitting on Lois's bed a lot of times. And we would listen to speaker tapes, and we would read books, and we would laugh, and we would work the steps. And I got through the steps very quickly. And I could put things, she had me blow bubbles. And I thought, this is really stupid to blow bubbles. And so I got bubbles, and I went and I blew them, and I'm shaking this wand and trying to get it over with. And then I go to a meeting, and this other gal was sharing about her sponsor had her blow bubbles, and she's watching them glisten in rainbows and float up in the sky. And I'm like, really? So I bought more bubbles, and I did that. And what I realized is sometimes I can put things that I don't want in bubbles, or I could write them on a piece of paper and put them in a God box, or I could write them on a piece of paper and throw them in the garbage or flush them down the toilet. I don't have to hold on to stuff anymore. I just ask God, what do you want me to do here? These prayers in our big book, I love these prayers. My book is falling apart. They told me if my book's falling apart, I won't. So working with others and into action, all the pages are loose and they're falling out of my book. With this 11-step prayer, there's promises, and every step has promises. So on page 85, it says, if I let up on my spiritual program of action and rest on my laurels, I'm headed for trouble because alcohol is the subtle foe. I have a daily reprieve contingent on maintaining my spiritual condition. I don't maintain it because to me, that is walking on a treadmill and I'm not getting anywhere. I have to grow my program. And the way that happens is God gives me difficulties to overcome to make me stronger. I get to walk through life and not think about drinking. So meditation, I found out, it doesn't have to be just sitting still, and I can walk and I can look at flowers growing up in the cracks and say, how does that happen? That little seed. comes up in a little crack that it found in the sidewalk. And I asked God for prayers for how do I see the situation as you do. I remember so many things. When I was new, I was 4 months sober. I went to a conference in Lake Murray, Oklahoma, scared to death. A lot of times they said, is there a topic for the meeting? And I said, fear, because I don't know how to do this. I learned unconditional love. There are people water skiing, and I'm really afraid of water. And so, let's stop. So I was afraid of water, and these people kept trying to get me to water ski. And I said, I am scared of water. If I can't have my feet on the ground and my head above water, I freak out. They said, we want you to water ski. I said, I'm terrified of this. And I shared it at a meeting. And what happened is whenever I'm somewhere, people kept coming up to me going, did you try it yet? No, scared. And they would sit and share with me their experience. So finally I got tired of that after a few hours. So I found my friend and said, let's go try water skiing. So I went on the boat. They gave me a life jacket and they showed me the water ski and told me to go over the side. And I told you I'm scared. And some members of Alcoholics Anonymous went over the side of the boat with me so I wouldn't be alone in the water. And I held onto that tow rope, got the skis on, and the boat pulled away and it came out of my hands. I couldn't hold it tight enough. Tried it a couple more times and then it started raining and I said, thank you, God, I don't have to do this anymore. But the point is I tried it. And I met a lot of people from Dallas and they said, come to Dallas to our meeting. And I said, I don't drive in Dallas. It's bumper to bumper traffic. And I'm coming home from the conference and it's Labor Day with a lot of bumper to bumper traffic. And I didn't know the road forked off to go to Fort Worth. I was just going straight. And I was just not trying to hit the car in front of me. And all of a sudden I look up and the street signs are Stemmons Freeway, Mockingbird Lane, downtown Dallas signs. This higher power that has a sense of humor said, Carol, you can do what you don't think you can do. Just follow what's in front of you and you can do things you never dreamed of. When I was 8 months sober, I told Lois I wanted a kiss from a guy for Valentine's Day. I didn't want to call the old boyfriend. She said, pray about it. I said, okay, by then I'm willing to try your way. And I prayed about it. Said, okay, God, I'd like a kiss from a guy for Valentine's Day. Let's see what you do with it. God gave me a kiss from Willie Nelson, the singer, for Valentine's Day. My God thinks bigger than I do. Right? I have so many God stories. I got to go to Seattle to the International at 2 years sober. I'm giving you some God stories so you see how big my God is. I was coming home from work one day and I was maybe a year and a half sober. And a couple months before that, I met a guy named Clint from California. He was talking at the conference about the International in Seattle coming up. He asked me why I don't go. And I kept making excuses till I ran out of them and I registered for the conference. So one day I'm coming home. I'm not even a year and a half sober. And I was telling God on the way home, I need to be a little more active. I haven't been as active as I know I need to, because you told me the longer I'm sober, the more I have to do. And I get home and there's a message on my answering machine. Hi, this is John from GSO. We know you're going to Seattle and we want you to share at the International Loners International meeting. I don't think that big. God thinks that big. God hears my thoughts. So when I do my prayers, sometimes I don't have to say them out loud. God hears my thoughts. And sometimes God says, okay, Carol, we'll take care of this now. And sometimes God says, let's wait a bit. I ask God to bless it or block it and let me know the truth. I don't always know what's best for me. I have to trust that a higher power does. That's why I don't question it. When I was new, I would say, okay, God, I'm taking your hand and I'm going into the day with you. And nothing come behind me that hasn't first passed God's gentle, loving hands. And if God's everything or nothing, then I remember when I was a little kid, we had this cartoon called Felix the Cat, and he had this magic bag and he'd pull all these things out of it. And sometimes I would use God as a plexiglass shield. Sometimes I use God as a blanket. And God says, that's okay. I'm everything, so I can be everything. My God is gender neutral. I don't think of it as masculine. My God can make it be sunny and rain, and the sun comes out, and the sun and the clouds come out and paints the sky different. I don't know anybody can do that. But I call it God, even though it's gender neutral. Don't have a visual on it. It's not religious. I have a spiritual God that keeps showing me how big God is. Through our online meetings, I get to connect and meet people all around the world now that I would have never met. And I get to hear the miracles in your life. And I see the miracles in my life. And it gives me specific directions in my book, right? Step 80, on 84 to 88 are the pages that saved my life. Because it says, upon awakening, I think about the 24 hours ahead, and I ask God to direct my thinking. I pause when agitated or doubtful. I ask for the right thought or action. It gives me specifics. I pause when agitated or doubtful. I ask for the right thought or action. I remind myself I'm no longer running the show. And I humbly say to myself many times each day, thy will be done. And it says sometimes in this book that I can have absurd actions, right? What used to be a hunch or an occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of my mind. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable I'm going to be inspired at all times. I might pay for this presumption all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, I will find that my thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration, and I come to rely on it. I get to know how to act appropriately. My God is so big that my God changes time zones for me. I've had a lot of surgery. I've had a lot of health issues. I have my footprint story. God gave me my personal footprint story. I remember a few years ago when I was traveling in my camper van, I love back roads, and I was on a back road. I might pass a car or a house every few hours. It was getting very dark. The sun was going to set. I said, God, I really don't feel comfortable with this. I was thinking it. I didn't say it out loud. I said, I don't want a deer or moose or something to run out and hit it. And I drive a little farther and I see a sign and it says, you are entering the Pacific time zone. And I drive another few miles and the sun is up an hour earlier than where it would have been where I was. And I get to this town, it's almost as it's dark. When I had a year sober, I had foot surgery. Lois died. I didn't think about drinking. She taught me how to make decisions and how to pray. I wasn't lost. I did get another sponsor, but one day I had this wood shoe and I was on crutches and my foot's throbbing and I'm saying, God, I really don't like this. I want to go walk and play and not have my foot hurt. What God did is he said, my neighbor says, I'll take you to the store so you can get out of the house. And I'm standing in front of a store called Target and I want to throw the crutches and the shoe through the window. What God did is he had a lady wheel out of the store in a wheelchair. She wheeled over to the passenger side of her car, opened the door, pulled herself onto the passenger seat, folded up her wheelchair and put it behind her seat, lifted her legs into the car, closed the door, slid across to the driver's seat and drove away. And I said, okay, God, I'm going to be able to walk one day. And I don't always walk without pain. I've got a lot of chronic pain and health stuff. But what God did is God shows me, what am I grateful for? Like Lois taught me, no matter what am I grateful for? When I was 4 years sober, I got colon rectal cancer. Again, I had it before. Had to have surgery. Doctor gives me a 99-to-1 odds I can have reversible colon surgery. Gave it to God. Prayed about it. I'm laying on the stretcher outside the operating room. I'm talking to the anesthesiologist. And I said, you sound very familiar. And he took his mask and his cap off and he said, "Glass House." He heard I'm having surgery and he got on my case. I said, "Can we invite," his name was Jim. I said, "Can we invite God into the operating room, please?" I told him what my odds for the surgery were, and he said, yes. We held hands. We said the Serenity Prayer. Another doctor walks by and he goes, "Do you two know each other?" Jim says, "Yes, we're both sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous." The outcome of that surgery is I have a permanent ileostomy. They took out more parts of my body. I am missing 6 internal parts of my body, major organs. And if God says, "Carol, I'm going to put you back the way you were, but you lose those lessons and experiences," I would say, "No, thank you, God." Because I've been able to share them with a lot of people. I've gotten a lot of strength from them. I've gotten a lot of growth, and I get to share them. I also learned the difference between theory and experience through that episode. Because I had a nurse in the hospital. If you don't know what an ileostomy is, I have a plastic bag on the outside of my body that collects my brown stuff. And the nurse I had did not know how to take care of it other than what he learned in school. And it wasn't working. And I told my doctor, "And you told me to always do research and to look things up and to read books and find out more information on whatever it is. And that every time I'm going through something different, I'm a newcomer." And that's what I do. All the same stuff that I did when I was new. So I went to a different hospital and I talked to this lady who had one for 20 years and she gave me some tips that I've been able to share with others, and it made all the difference. Why Alcoholics Anonymous works is you don't tell me what you think I should do. You say, "This is my experience and this is what worked and what didn't work. And this is what's in the big book to help you with that." And there's prayers. I live near the beach. I don't go there often, but I was going to a beach meeting for many years. And sometimes I'd get there and I'd stand with my feet in the water. I'd get to the meeting an hour early and I'd stand in with my feet in the water and just watch the waves or the sun. One day there was this little turtle hatchling. The sea turtles come up and they dig a hole about 18 inches deep. And they lay eggs, and then the eggs hatch out. And when the eggs hatch, they have to climb over each other and get out of the sand, and then they go towards the water. And this one day I saw this little hatchling, and it's maybe 2 by 3 inches. And it comes out of the nest and it's walking through the sand, and it goes in a footprint to the foot, the footprint may be 2 inches deep, but it gets in there and it climbs out somehow, and it goes down to the water. And it goes inside the wave and it gets washed back to the shore, and it goes back again and it gets washed back. And I watched this little turtle for a while. And finally the turtle went into the ocean and it got carried away, and its odds of survival are pretty slim. But that was blind faith to me. That's what it taught me. I need to have blind faith and say, "Okay, God, let's see how this goes." No matter what, I take the action. God has the results. I don't know what they are all the time. But I find out that, God gives me a lot of chances to grow through stuff, and got a lot of chances to work on step 6 and 7 every day. And all the promises in the book have come true, including the one that says alcohol's the subtle foe. So I pray a lot. I've read these things so many times. Sometimes I get the books out and read them, and sometimes I know them. I don't know them so well that I don't know what they mean. Because I've had a lot of surgery, I have a lot of chronic pain. I have a lot of health issues going on. Had them for 10 years. 2010, when I was 22 years sober, had to have 4 more surgeries in a few months, and it made my health worse. But as a result of that, I get to look back, and those promises in the big book came true once again. I love the last 2 pages of Keys to the Kingdom, because it says, "I'm never going to outgrow this program. It allows for limitless expansion." It says, "Where I used to run from responsibility, I find myself attacking things with surprising vigor, applying the principles of this program." And on top of page 100 is another one of my favorites, and I would write all these miracles in the margins. And I think I was up to page 107 when I sent my book to GSO. And that's another miracle. But it says, "Both me and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress, and if I persist, remarkable things will happen." When I look back, I'll find that the things that came to me when I put myself in God's hands are far more wonderful than anything I could have imagined. So follow the dictates of a higher power, and I'll live in a new wonderful world no matter what my present circumstance. Those surgeries are ones I had to look back at. Because of that, thank you, I got to reevaluate my life, and I got to go in my camper van and travel all around the country and have amazing experiences and go to meetings all over the world and talk to God. And people said, aren't you afraid to go by yourself? And I said, I don't go by myself. I go with God. God goes and I go with God. Faith is further adventure in trusting him or her, whatever the higher power is. And adventure is the key word. Had amazing adventures. Told you about God changing the time zone. Sometimes I look at my GPS and my maps and I think I'll try the map because the map looks shorter. But my GPS tells me something different. What I learned is a GPS is usually right, because my maps will say, you can go to Mount Rushmore. This is only 20 miles. The GPS took me way longer than that. What happened is I did my map route. It took me 2 hours going about 25, 30 miles an hour, going over 2 mountain ranges to get to Mount Rushmore. But if I used the GPS, it would have been a flat, straight road and taken less time going at a higher speed. But it's not the destination that matters, it's the journey. It's my journey that I'm growing through, that I'm getting experiences through no matter what. And I'm learning how to pray, and I'm learning about meditation a little bit more. And step 10 is as important to me as step 11 and all the others. It tells me what to watch for all day. I make the prayers because God answers them in God's timing. And Lois told me whenever I make a phone call or I do something, invite God into it. Say, okay, God, let this call go the way you want it to. Let this situation be what you want it to, God, not what I want it to. I remember my best thinking got me to you. And I apply the traditions because I don't have opinion on outside issues. But what I found is a few months ago, it's probably 5 months or so now, maybe 6 or more. It's not all that long. I was laying in bed and I'm saying, God, I'm tired of hurting all the time. Some days my pain is pretty intense. And I say, I don't like this, God. I don't want to drink, but some days I don't want to be here. I have to be honest. Some days it gets weary. But there's people that I know that I'm close to in this program that I've met online that have more serious stuff to me. And I remember Lois, and I remember, what are you grateful for, Carol? Stand up and take 2 steps and say, thank you, God, you can walk, talk, and breathe. And so what God said is, Carol, you go to a lot of online meetings. I go to like 4 to 8 or 9 a day because I'm retired. I'm not doing anything else. And God says, you're talking on the phone and you're going to the meetings, and that's all great, but where's your time with me? And so God says, when I'm laying in bed like that, I get to talk to God, and I get to pray, and I get to be still. It says, be still and know that I am God. And I get to lay there and be still and talk to God. And God says, get up now. And I do, and I feel better, and I get moving. And then you call me, or you ask me to share my story, or somebody asked me to take them through the steps, whatever it is. And I said, yes, I'm grateful to do it. You saved my life, and you gave me a life that is beyond imagination. And when I'm driving out west or driving anywhere, I always get in the car and I say, God, if it be your will, can we all get where we're going safely? And when I get somewhere, I say, thank you. And when I'm driving and I see a mountain pop up in the middle of a field, God, how do you do that? How does that happen? God, I'm driving and all of a sudden the road stops. There's a canyon I'm driving into. How do you do that, God? I don't know anybody can do that. And I will tell you, in 2017, I was driving on a north-south road between 2 east-west interstates in Mississippi in July, and it was really hot. And this voice said, stop for gas. I said, I really don't need gas. It's only been like 100 miles since I got gas. I really don't need gas. But because I'm doing the steps and that intuitive thought or decision, listen to that voice, that inner voice, and I stopped for gas. And my camper, the transmission just quit with no warning. And I called, I was in a town. There was nothing for another hour where the direction I was headed. And I got towed the wrong direction for a half hour. But where God had me towed to was a mechanic that said, you can plug into the side of my building. It is going to take about a week to get a transmission. And across the street was a beauty parlor, a pizza place, and a grocery store. Where God guides, God provides. God shows me that God is there and taking care of me no matter what, if I'm willing to do the work. God gives me pop quizzes. Carol, what do you know and how have you applied it here? What have you learned? How can you do it? It's easy to have a good program when stuff goes the way I want, but how is my program when it doesn't? I get to find out. The end of, share one, at the end of 2000 and early 2012, we found more tumors and I can't be operated on anymore. I've got some of my brain and my abdomen again. And the doctor told me I wouldn't live till the end of the year, 2013. So I sold my condo and I gave everything away and I made my funeral arrangements. Went into hospice for several months. Said, I'm not going to do that. I didn't sit around waiting to die. I was still active as much as I could. And 10 years later, I'm still here. So I don't know what God's plan is other than me to not want to drink. But the alcohol's that subtle, folks. At 31 and a half years sober, that subtle foe stuck its little head in and said, Carol, go buy a bottle of vodka. When I'm in Texas, my friends have a bakery and they buy vodka and vanilla beans and make a vanilla extract. And I like to bake. And this voice said, Carol, go buy vanilla. Yeah, vanilla beans. Your girlfriend just gave you some. Go buy vodka. Entertain it. Starts taking root. What I've learned is I can't entertain that. I have to tell you no matter what. Share it with God and you and say, God, take this away. God, take this stinking thinking. I choose to not let it sabotage my recovery. I'm grateful to be here. I think my time's up. Thank you for asking me to share. I hope I shared something that helps you. And if I did, thank our higher powers.